Campaigns are ramping up with just over 6 weeks left until Election Day. In Minnesota's 7th District State Senate race, voters will be sending a new senator to the Capitol. The 7th District encompasses most of the city of Duluth. Well, joining us now is Donna Bergstrom, the Republican-endorsed candidate in State Senate District 7, and Jen McEwen is the DFL-endorsed candidate in State Senate District 7. And thanks to both of you for being here. We really appreciate you coming in, making time in this busy schedules of yours.
Thank you, Julie.
Summer's over. A lot of folks are just starting to pay attention to what's happening as we approach the election. For those who are just tuning in, Donna, maybe you can start by talking a little bit about who you are and why you decided to jump into the race.
Sure, absolutely, yes. I'm Donna Bergstrom. I was raised in this area, grew up in Carlton. My grandfather graduated from Old Central High School, so I have deep roots in this area. I graduated from Carlton High School, went down to the university in the Twin Cities and got my degree in political science. And then after a little trip backpacking around Europe, I came back to the United States and decided to join the Marine Corps. So I was in the Marine Corps for just over 20 years and retired in 2010 as a lieutenant colonel, as a military intelligence officer. Got to see a lot of the world that way and meet a lot of good people and learn how to work with teams. And that is a big component of the Marine Corps, is the leadership part of it. 2010 convinced my husband, we were living out in Washington, D.C., that Minnesota was really a great place to be and we should come back to my home state. So we moved back here, and since that time I've been working, and I was a guardian ad litem for a short bit of time with the 6th Judicial District, and I worked at the Fond du Lac Care Clinic as a patient coordinator, and I was working as a lobbyist just recently for the Red Lake Nation, which I'm a member of, and finished up working with them in this last session. So got a lot of experience under my belt.
Jen, what made you jump into the race?
Well, a number of reasons. I mean, I'll tell you a little bit about myself as well. I grew up in Duluth. My family on both sides has been in Duluth for generations. I actually grew up in the home that my great-grandparents built after they were married here and had immigrated from Sweden and met here and were married. So I grew up in that home, and that's the home where my husband and I are raising our kids today. So I'm a graduate of our public schools, and my 2 kids go to our public schools as well. They're in middle school, and my husband is a public school teacher as well. I'm an attorney. I represent disabled workers against insurance companies, and I also handle Social Security disability appeals in my work now. Prior to that, I was a public defender in the 6th Judicial District and worked alongside Donna at that time as well. And I'm also the president of the board of the Damiano Center in Duluth right now. So, and I decided to jump in the race for a number of reasons, but I would say that primary among them was the sense of urgency. I had been kind of following our incumbent previous senators' votes on some natural resource issues, and I and some other Duluthians had been disappointed in some of those votes. And so I was following those and considering that perhaps it would be appropriate to make a challenge at the primary level, but wasn't sure if it was an appropriate time for me in my life. I have a career and a busy life, but when the pandemic hit, it's sort of, I'm sure both of you felt this way as well, that it brings everything into a kind of stark relief, where you're sort of assessing, am I doing what I should be doing in terms of serving the purpose of this time and place and answering the call to service? So I decided now is the time for me to jump in and for us to be advancing on some really important issues that we haven't been moving forward and making enough progress on. And I wanted to be a part of that.
Of course, COVID-19 has dramatically impacted Duluth's economic health. Can you talk a little bit, we'll start with you, Jen, about how you think state government should maybe best help communities like Duluth on the road to recovery? Let's try to keep the answers somewhat brief because we want to get as many topics in as we can.
Absolutely. You know, I think primary to that is the local government aid. A state senator is charged with making sure that that local government aid goes through and that our local governments then are able to provide our basic infrastructure services services, our water infrastructure, road infrastructure, to keep our property taxes down, because property taxes are actually quite regressive. But especially now in the time of our pandemic and in the recession that has come upon us, this is a time to lean in economically. This is not a time for austerity. It is not a time to make cuts that aren't absolutely necessary, but this is a time to invest. We know that from our history in the Great Depression. When we invested into our economy, that's what helped lift the economy out. We have to give people a means to be able to participate again in the economy. So those are some of the best ways to recover and to go forward.
And Donna, how do you think state government can best help communities like Duluth as we start to get back into economic recovery?
Well, we absolutely need to open up our small businesses again. They're the backbone of our economy. The other aspect is, here in Northeast Minnesota, we have abundant resources. So we have our mining and our logging and our trucking industry. We have a beautiful port here. We have rails. We have surface transportation. We can really move our economy along while we gain energy independence. We can talk about Line 3 replacement project. That would bring $22 million back into the government's coffers just right off the bat and employ 4,000 plus people. So there's immediate ways that we can get our economy back up and running. I believe that, with our COVID, there are certain restrictions, but obviously our businesses are ready to get back up and running. We've seen some really creative solutions for people to come back and do their business in the way that fits them. And I think with our folks looking to get back to work, I think we should take advantage of that. And our kids are going to be coming out of school, graduating. They're going to want to enter into the trades and the unions and the aspects that they want to do to pursue their life. And we want to keep them here. We want to make sure that we have jobs in our community so our children can stay here if that's what they want to do.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the Line 3 replacement. Any environmental concerns about that as you try to balance job creation and the environment?
Yes, and I've been here now for 10 years. We moved back in 2010, right? And so I've been following this. Line 3 replacement should have happened 5 years ago. They've had their environmental studies, they've had their reviews, they've had public input. It's actually the infrastructure that needs to be replaced because it is at risk right now. So replacing it is actually an environmentally sound decision. So I would say that we need to move forward with that because all these studies have been done.
Mm-hmm. And Jen, where do you stand on Line 3?
I'm opposed to the rebuild of Line 3. I think it's a tough one because, as Donna said very well, there are some potential for some jobs, especially in the short come, that people are really have been waiting for and really have put a lot of hope in. But I think, when we're talking about our transition to a clean energy economy, we've been kicking the can down the road now for decades, really my whole life. I know growing up in the 80s, we were talking about the climate crisis, but we haven't taken the steps that we've needed to mitigate for that. And so now we're in a situation where all of the scientists throughout the world have come together and they're clamoring for our civil institutions, our economic institutions, to make a transition here within the next 10 years. And they have warned us that if we do not transition within these 10 years, that the worst of what the climate crisis has in store for us will be realized. Now, that doesn't mean that the world ends in 10 years, but what that means is that the quality of life for people on the planet will be severely impacted in dramatic negative ways. So it's incumbent upon us to move forward proactively to build a clean energy economy. There's also many jobs to be had in creating that new clean energy infrastructure. And one of the other concerns, just real quick, what I'm really concerned about is if we invest in things like the Line 3 rebuild, what we're going to be left with are these stranded assets where workers in our community are going to really be left high and dry because the age of fossil fuels is ending right now. And what I don't want to see is workers in our community having the rug pulled out from underneath them and not being prepared for these next years of what is already happening all around us. So we need to get on board. We need to lead in that area.
Many communities right now looking at sweeping police reforms in the wake of George Floyd's death and other cases of law enforcement using lethal force. What, if any, changes do you think need to be done to address charges of racism and other issues that may be taking place in law enforcement right now?
I think there are a number of really great ideas that are floating around right now. I mean, there is a sort of renaissance of thinking about public safety. How do we create true public safety? And what does a public safety apparatus that serves the public really look like? And I think when we look at our police departments, we see that perhaps the way that they're structured now, where we're reacting to social ills and problems that are happening in our communities with force in our police departments, isn't always the best answer. That we maybe need to diversify. And I think these reforms and changes will look different in different communities, and I think that's appropriate. But there are some basic changes that we can make, reforms to the post board, the reforms that have already taken place at the state level. I support those, and some others as well. So yeah, there's many options.
Donna, what are your ideas in this area?
We're the home of the Duluth model, okay? Many people are familiar with that, where the community came together. We identified what was happening with our victims and our assaults and in those categories, and we sat down and we had community input and created what is now internationally known as the Duluth model. So I think that any time that we can bring our stakeholders to the table, it's a good thing. And what I have read from at the federal level with Senator Scott's bill is that justice reform is being talked about, and there's some very good ideas. One of the things that is in that bill, the senator's bill, is more body cams so that we have accountability. And then those body cams, what happens after it? How do they get loaded up? And then the data analyzed and looked at. Also, we talk about training. You need to have better training. And of course, I think you always need to recruit from within your community, the community members that want to serve in that community, because that's their family, that's their home, that's their neighbors. So that's the areas that I would look at.
All right, well, we are out of time. Lots of topics we weren't able to cover, but hopefully you'll get a chance to get out there and talk to the folks before Election Day. Donna Bergstrom, Jen McEwen, thank you so much for coming in. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you for having us.